Hi, everybody. Joe Chaffee here. Weather in 5 days in 5 minutes. Coming up tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, we're going to go in depth on this potential for a developing storm in the Gulf of Mexico that'll be moving up the eastern seaboard later in the weekend and into early next week. So be sure to tune in at 7:35 p.m. for that. That's tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. Meanwhile, we've got mostly nice weather going on. There's certainly a chill in the air as we look at the satellite loop. We see sunshine along the coast. We also have some lake effect snows going on, coming off of Lake Huron and also off of Lake Ontario, and that's impacting parts of upstate New York with some bands of snow along I-90. Meanwhile, we've got sunshine down into the Florida Panhandle, but you'll notice there is a lot of disorganized moisture from the northwest Caribbean into the Gulf of Mexico. You also have a stream of moisture coming out of the Pacific and moving up into Texas and into the southern Rockies. So that's producing some rain and snow in that region. The southwest is nice. The Pacific Northwest is not terrible, but there's moisture offshore there that's heading off toward the coast. Radars as of 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You see the lake effect that's happening up across New York State, particularly along and north of I-90 with the winds coming in off of Lake Ontario. We've got snow showers up in New England. Radars are dry pretty much for the rest of the East Coast except for southern Florida. Starting to see some rain there. And you can see patches of rain and showers across Texas. Changes over to snow in the mountains of New Mexico and Colorado. And just a little bit of light activity coming into the far corners of the Pacific Northwest. We are going to have to deal with a storm system, I think, later into the weekend and early next week. And the latest forecast from the Weather Prediction Center folks, they have pushed higher rainfall amounts, now 2 inches plus for southern and southeastern New England, back to about New York City, coastal New Jersey, down the coast through eastern Virginia. The rains get even higher, 3 inches possible in coastal North and South Carolina, down into Georgia, and continuing south from there into Florida. Lesser amounts as you go inland. The 1 inch line is just west of the New Jersey-Pennsylvania state line and then runs down through east central Virginia, central North Carolina, and South Carolina, cuts Georgia in half, and then down to the Florida Panhandle. 1/2 inch to 1.5 inches of precip across Louisiana, back through Texas, and on up into northwest Texas. And as we said, it's snow in the southern Rockies, and we're looking at some heavy rains coming in over the next several days into the Pacific North. Well, I'm sorry, into the northwestern part of California. With some 3 inch plus rains in northwestern California and also some heavy snows possible in the Sierra Nevadas. As we check out WPC's snowfall forecast for the next 72 hours, and this is just an updated map here. Again, it's mostly light lake effect that's happening in upstate New York. This is the probability for at least 2, and that will be winding down in short order. In the meantime, back in southern Colorado and New Mexico, we have an area here where there's a very high probability of at least 2, and even elevated probabilities for at least 8 in northeastern New Mexico and in southern Colorado. So let's take a look at how this is all going to play out, because it's very complex. Always seems to be that way when you have multiple systems running around and trying to figure out what's going to happen. Plus, we have the added feature of something coming out of the Gulf of Mexico with a lot of tropical moisture. No issues, obviously, for tonight into tomorrow. It's a shot of cold air that's come down to from eastern Canada, down in the 20s tonight. Colder temperatures as you go up into upstate New York and northern New England. High pressure overhead tomorrow. Should be a nice sunny day. Probably having a tough time getting out of the 30s in most places. That cool, chilly air extends all the way down into the southeast, and you start to see that moisture gathering in the Gulf of Mexico. Low pressure is going to develop on Friday in the southwest Gulf, and it's going to intensify as it moves northeastward. So we're looking at heavy rains for Florida, particularly for the lower peninsula as opposed to the panhandle at first, and then some heavy rains get into the panhandle. A lot's going to depend on the track of this. Now, it's not tropical in nature. There is a low probability that it could possibly gain some subtropical characteristics, and we want to at least pay attention to that, if only because of the fact that that injects a little extra oomph to the moisture that's coming in. And you can see that the GFS and the European, by the way, and the Icon model, all the global models are pretty much on the same page here. Um, that you could see some substantial rains with this as it moves northward. We don't see any issues for Friday. As we said, Friday actually temperatures will be the upper 40s to low 50s. There's a high that's going to build into the St. Lawrence Valley on Saturday. The winds are going to start turning onshore as on Saturday, and particularly Saturday night into Sunday. Now here we are Sunday afternoon. The rains will be spreading up the coast from south to north, probably reaching southern New England by Sunday evening. And then we're just going to follow the track of this low as it moves northward. I think we'll see the heaviest rain and the strongest winds between 1 a.m. Monday morning to 1 p.m. Monday afternoon. That's kind of how I'm looking at it in terms of the timing. And I'm just going to mention this now, but we're going to be watching a northern stream shortwave that's going to try to get involved toward the end of this. And that's why we've gone from having all rain all the way up to perhaps seeing a changeover to snow on the backside in inland areas, kind of like what we saw just this past weekend. But perhaps this might be a little more robust for inland areas. This is early. All of the models are indicating this possibility, so I think it's going to be something that is worth paying attention to. So again, no issues at all into Sunday morning for eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. Then we'll deal with this weather system that's going to be moving up the coast. It's going to be rather vigorous here. The strongest winds will be right along the immediate coast. The winds will probably be less of an issue as you move inland. And again, this is an early look at things. I think we've lined up the fact that there's going to be a storm system coming up for the weekend. Now we're going to spend the next couple of days watching the models basically tighten up, throw maybe a few curveballs here and there, and then we'll have this all hopefully settled down in terms of what to expect by the time we get to the weekend. And of course, join us tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show at 7:35 p.m., and we will get into this in a big way. So have a great rest of your day.